Can everyone hear me? Well, I'm going to try to speak in Texan. Shorter sentences with some content. Okay? If you have any question or observation, feel free to join in. Today, I'd like to congratulate UVA on nearly 20 years of operation as an online judge that has judged over 16 million solutions over these 18 years. In fact, there's not enough intellectual capacity among all of the graduate students of computer science to have done that by hand. And to make that available to everyone who has access to the internet is a great and lofty achievement. It's the kind of thing that helps us be a better world. And so thank you to all of the UVA community of contributors and thank you, Miguel, for your inspiration and the fact that you attract and produce a very bright and capable community that makes things happen. And thank you, Miguel, for your lack of sleep for so many years in maintaining the accessibility of the UVA Online Judge. It's been very interesting to be here and to hear the presentations and to see how things are evolving. Language is important. A good metaphor will allow you to explore expanding your world with the higher prospects of prosperity. So the sports metaphor is a really good metaphor for any human activity in which performance matters. And in programming, in coding, and systems design, performance matters. If I look today at what you are all doing, you're helping people perform. I've spent most of my life in the university. And what I loved about the ACM programming contest is that it allowed us to improve the performance of bright and capable students outside of the classroom as well as inside the classroom. Because we were able to tap into the energy of playing a game, the energy of being a sport, the energy of representing your university, to help people expand not only their problem-solving prowess, but their social connections beyond their class in the university to include people at other universities. And as a result of that, for 40 years, we've helped the next generation each year have more problem solvers, and for those problem solvers to be connected so that they can work on problems that really need to be solved. So as you build new worlds for problem solvers and push problem solving as a way of life to younger and younger generations, when you make what is available today at university available to children who are 6 years old in 20 years, you're delivering to them the riches of society, the riches of community. You're providing new life, the opportunity that were only available to Caesar's family 2,000 years ago. And I actually believe that the world needs to develop a belief in problem solving and a commitment to problem solving if we're going to be all that we ought to be as a global community. We need to invest our energy into improving the life of others. Because if our generations don't do that, then there are other natural laws that will constrain those generations. From my perspective, I really prefer raising a generation of problem solvers to war, pestilence, and famine. You know, I prefer exploring the universe in the large and in the small and in the community to destroying the world that we're in. And a lot of times the difference is attitude, direction, and opportunity. With global communications, the world is different. When I was young, I had a very privileged life in many respects. My father was career military. We traveled, perhaps too much, until my father was disabled during the Hungarian Spring in 1956. We were never anywhere longer than about a year or a year and a half. But I got to meet different people from different parts of the world, and I could see the commonality of people at the spiritual level and the diversity of people and how they had learned how to deal with life and opportunity where they were. There's not one solution to humanity except a comet. And that's not the solution we want. What there is life and diversity. And there are different ways of living that are more attractive to other persons. So coming back to the problem-solving communities in a globally connected digital world, what should they look like? Well, I like the sports metaphor because that was a part of my growing up. We played baseball. I was a catcher. Later on, I was the top scorer in spatial recognition for the U.S. Air Force in 1967. Why? Well, because my dad said, if you're going to be a catcher, you have to stop the ball. It's less painful if you catch it. Well, I learned that when that baseball was coming toward me, it was in my best interest to figure out where it was going to hit and make sure that I watched it come all the way into the glove. Now that seems very, very strange, but in fact, I think the spatial recognition I came was because I was a catcher. We played a lot of games when I was a kid. Games of strategy. And so I was pretty good at games of strategy. My mother taught accounting, and she had a calculator. And when I'd get unruly, she would say, "Here, work on this," and then she would enter at random, 20 numbers, calculate the result, tear it off, and say, "You add these things up and we'll see how fast you can do that and whether it matches what the machine said." So I learned how to group to sums of 10. I could calculate things very, very quickly as a young child. My mother was both a great mother and a terrible mother in many respects. She was not all that nurturing, but what she was able to do was to keep me busy. So at age 4, she started my schooling simply to get relief, and it turned out that she started school at 4, so it seemed to be a fairly reasonable thing for her to do. Why did she start at age 4? Well, because she had 3 older sisters, and she lived in Pontotoc, Mississippi. And when her older sister went to elementary school, she cried, and her mom, my grandmother, had a soft heart and talked to the teacher and said, "Well, could Mary go and if she was quiet?" And the teacher said, "Sure." And my mother didn't know any better, so she did the same things the other kids did and passed the first grade and then passed the second grade. And so when she was 16, she graduated from high school, and when she was 19, she graduated from university. Now there was a disadvantage that she's so much younger than the other kids. I don't recommend that. But what I do know is that you can start learning, in fact, do start learning from the point that you're born. Right? And different kids respond to education at different times. The tragedy in life is when someone's ready to learn something and the opportunity is not there at that time, you've missed the opportunity to connect. So part of the challenge of learning is to make sure that that next lesson, that next problem is available when they're ready to take it, not when you're ready to deliver it. And so I look back at my own life, and I realize when I say I had a privileged childhood, I'm not talking about that I was a gifted consumer. It's just that there was always a challenge and something interesting to do when I was young. And I think that if we view all children as our children, the sooner that we can provide a steady stream of things for them to learn, the more likely that they'll become problem solvers. And today's global internet activity and the communities that you are building today provide that opportunity, and I applaud you for doing that. Now, coming back to the sports metaphor, we're really good in the ICPC at putting on competitions for university students. We understand that part of that's done on the internet, but part of it is done locally and personally. And if you take away the local and personal part of it, the interest diminishes. If you take away the opportunity to learn when you want to learn, the performance diminishes. So when you look at a community, use the resources that you have so that people can communicate and participate in competitions with UVA, and that they can become better and better at problem solving. But make sure that you also have opportunities for people to get together personally and talk, just like this one. Because it lifts the spirit. It increases our conviction, and it helps us be more fruitful by not repeating the same mistakes that others have experienced, or trying something that other people are trying. You make friends. Now let's come back to the sports metaphor. Okay, what happens in baseball is this. If you want to learn how to be a good baseball player, you need to play baseball. But you also need to learn how to bat. And if you have to spend 4 hours in a baseball game to be able to bat twice, you're never going to learn how to bat. You need to have some batting practice. You need to have a machine that can throw different kinds of balls, and you learn how to coordinate it. And you need to have a coach who can say, hey, remember that you want to hit with your body's muscle, and as you move toward the hand, those are for refining the motion of the bat. You actually hit, with these big muscles that go down here, and that's what makes it go far. And when you watch that ball, watch the ball all the way down to the point that it hits the bat. And you learn that not just from the coaches, but the other guys on the team, because they're going to come over and say, hey, you need to improve your batting practice a little bit. Or another one may come over and say, I hold the bat this way, and I've found that I can do a lot better job if I'm trying to hit, say, over the outfielder's head, but not a home run, see? And then all of a sudden, So you see, you learn from the other members of the team, because they're your coaches too. And when you help somebody get a little bit better, as a coach, as a teacher, you actually learn even more, because they are your experiment. Have you tried this? Have you tried that? You can see what things work for most people, So when I look at problem solving, creating a community in which teams of people help each other become better members of the team is something that really enhances the lives of everyone who's in there, and it really can't be done that way in university and in school. Because the technology of school and the cost of school can't really afford all of those individual lessons. The tendency is that you have a degree program, and you have lectures, and you have tests to evaluate how you're doing on that. And while that'll produce a lot of degrees, it won't necessarily produce a lot of problem solvers. So I actually think probably all disciplines could improve their performance if they had a culture of excellence and an easy way for people to join in to become better at what they're learning to do, in our case, problem solving. A culture of excellence needs to be a culture in which each person is motivated to get better. Because excellence isn't an achievement, it's a direction. I think sports does that very well most of the time, but not all of the time. That is, if everybody in the community is playing Little League baseball, okay, and dividing up in teams, and everybody's getting better at baseball, that's great. But in high school, all of a sudden, what becomes important is how well your high school is doing compared to other high schools. And so the focus is not as much on developing better athletes as applying tests to filter out everyone except for a small number of survivors, and for whom a great investment is made so that one institution can claim that it's superior to another institution. In other words, the motivation sometimes becomes marketing. We are human beings. And what I would simply say is that in the ICPC community, nurturing needs to be the number one job. And nurturing is about helping people become better problem solvers. Are there persons of great talent? Yeah, there are. Okay? We need to nurture a sense in the community that the people who are great talent are persons that we should respect and admire, just in the same way that there are great soccer players and there are great baseball players, and we love to see them solve their big problems by competing with excellence. But let's make sure that everybody can play soccer and everybody can play baseball up to the level that it's contributing to their individual development. Now, when I look at how you become a better baseball player, again, it's by getting some lessons, it's by practicing, and then we would have pickup games. We would periodically play games, but they didn't count in the overall ranking. Then ultimately, we would play the games. And rankings were important, okay, because they were a motivator. However, sometimes things can fall out of sync. When I was in college, I agreed to be a baseball coach for a team that my two nephews were on. And one of the things that I said was that any student who's on the team, anyone who's on the team gets to play at least half the game. Now, there was one little youngster who just was never going to get a hit. But once we did this, the other team members worked with him. He couldn't throw well. I worked with him. I showed him how to throw without a baseball. His problem was that he had not learned how to shift his weight. So we practiced shifting weight. And everybody practiced shifting weight, and of all things, I discovered that everybody got a little bit better at throwing the ball. I've got to admit that the day that he got his first hit in a baseball game was a great day. The only problem was that he just stayed at the plate. And I said, "Run! Run!" And he looked at me and said, "Coach, which way?" Well, you know, what can I say? You know, fortunately, it so threw off the other team, you know, first base, and he was off, and he actually made it, and he was safe, and you know, it was a great moment. So one of the things I like to say is rejoice in the accomplishments of others, but really be a team sport. Really, it'll make you better as well. That was a very interesting year because some of the parents were so into the game that they started making nasty comments. And so the commissioner of Little League banned the parents from coming to the games for 2 weeks. Because the kids were crying after a game if they lost. Now the first game that my team lost, the kids were crying, and I asked them, "Why are you crying?" "Well, we're supposed to, Coach. We lost the game." I said, No. We don't cry after a game. We get together, you know, and think about what we did during the game and what we could do to play better. And then we go have some hot dogs. It was a better plan, and everybody bought in. But the reality is that the social world that they lived in explained to them they were supposed to cry when they didn't win a game. Okay. Well, the funny thing about that particular team is that it actually ended up winning. It was the #1 team by the end of the season of any of the teams that were competing. Okay? Well, why? Well, we accepted everybody, and a couple of kids that moved into town later joined our team, and one of them basically was so gifted that anytime he got up to bat, he hit a home run. It wasn't necessarily because anything that we did as a coach, but he had a good time, and the other students had a good time, and everybody got to compete, and everybody got to get better. And I would simply say that when you look at the world that you're building for future online judges, remember that the judge is important, but more important are the players, and more important is the coaching. And today, the direction of growth is to help coach and help each individual get more performance as a problem solver. The other is that while the sports metaphor is a metaphor that most of us understand, there are other great metaphors, and one of them is music. How do you become a musician? Well, buying a trumpet won't get it done. Now, I chose trumpet as my first instrument. I guess it was my second instrument because piano was first. So trumpet was my first instrument to play in band and orchestra. Okay? I chose it because it only had 3 valves. It was a bad choice, you know. And I sort of liked the way that it sounded, and so I had a lesson. And I had a teacher, and they said, okay, this is the way you form an embouchure, and you have to buzz, and you need to breathe this way. And here are some practice assignments for you to do, and I'll see you in 3 days. And so I practiced, and I saw them in 3 days, and then it was every week. And I got a little better, and sometimes I didn't. Then I started playing with others in ensembles. And I got a lot better as a result of the ensemble, and I could tell what I was doing well and what I was not doing well, but I still had the lessons. Okay? And so the way you become a musician is, okay, that you have lessons, you practice, you rehearse, okay? And when you rehearse in an ensemble, a team. Oh, granted, later on you'll play some solo work, but it turns out that there's still the ensemble playing even when the solo is being played, especially on trumpet. And you rehearse and you dress rehearse. Because if you're going to perform, you need to control your emotions. And what dress rehearsal allows you to do is to become comfortable with the idea of performing for other people. You try to get into the state of thinking so that you can perform. So today, when I teach architecture and give examinations, I give some homework assignments, not so much anymore. I give practice exams for them to practice problems I think are important, and a whole host of old exams, even if I have to make them up in the first year, because for some reason students don't do homework, but they love old exams. So call it an exam. Whatever works for the kids. But the difference is that I now give rehearsal exams. What's that? Here's an exam. I want you to start a clock, and I want you to do this same exam over and over and over again until you get it done in 20 minutes. And I want you to remember how you felt while you were doing it. And when you get to the point that you can do it, feel confident, can remember what you needed to do, then you're ready to come into my class and take an exam. And what happens? The performance goes up. Because memory, is linked to emotion, and emotion to memory. And people have bodies, and those bodies have minds, and we have to know what their constraints are, how they behave, and it turns out that a lot of poor performance in my class was simply because they didn't understand what every musician has to understand, and that is they have to get in the right framework to be able to produce. Now, that's about it. Look for different metaphors that are attracted to different people. There's another metaphor I'm going to give you very quickly, and that was my grandmother's house. In the ICPC Coming to the World Finals, you're coming to my grandmother's house. That's our model. Come to Grandma's house. Okay, there's going to be competition, for attention, but everybody loves you. We're glad for you to be there. We're proud of the accomplishments that you've made. Okay, and as a community, you're getting stronger because you're better problem solvers. That's Grandma's house. And if you went to Grandma's house, it might be the case that Grandma decided that you needed to do a little bit of needlework. She made things. You needed to learn how to feed the chickens. You needed to go out and learn how to harvest the cabbages. I did that once. Unfortunately, I harvested them all for her. So what I am saying is that some kids are going to respond to problem-solving environment that's like Grandma's house. Try to find lots of wrappers that are attractive to different people. Okay? Right now, most of the wrappers that we have for sports programming are wrappers that most men understand. Make sure that we have some wrappers that are natural to a larger community. So make sure that we have Grandma's house where we can come and create together and become better problem solvers and figure out, how to manage the meal plan as well as how to manage the baseball game. The underlying patterns may be similar, but to one person they may respond emotionally so that they are enabled to be great performers. Yeah, that's it. So thank you very much for inviting me here, and it's a privilege to be here.
Hands,